The shock has not worn off, and honestly, after maybe the most surprising result in the history of the game, it might never fade for Ohio State. That's Zach Boren. I am Austin Ward. It is a new week. It is a very different feeling week for Ohio State after 13-10, a loss to Michigan on Saturday in the Horseshoe. Oh, that's a mouthful, Zach. I don't know where to begin.
This one's tough, man. You said it. Might be one of the toughest defeats I have seen in my lifetime. I can tell you that much. Yeah, I mean, there are so many questions coming out of this game, and obviously, we've seen tons of fans on social media. The media in general, the national media, like there are a whole bunch of questions that need to be answered, but at the same time, like, I know this is a very painful day for Buckeye fans, for Buckeye Nation, but at the same time, you still have the goal of the national championship in front of you. And I think that's what everyone has to see and see that there is still some positive with this. Like the new format has saved this season, right? If this is the old playoff format, obviously, you're not doing much the rest of the year. But now with a 12-team playoff, with the very real possibility that you're hosting a home playoff football game, that the chances of still winning a national championship are there, you have to change your mind to that. Like it's only going to get easier every day that passes to get over this loss. But in this moment right now, you have to regroup. I mean, that's the toughest thing right now is that the players are hurting, the coaches are hurting. You have to find a way to turn the page, move on, and put your attention towards the finishing this season the right way.
Yeah, I wonder how that's going to look, Zach. You played the game. You played it at that Ohio State championship caliber level. You've been through highs and lows. I know that the mentality of these guys who got to this point means that they may be able to do that by the middle of the month and maybe go win 4 straight games. I'm just trying to put myself in their shoes and think after the most painful loss of their lives, of their career, for a Cody Simon, for a Jack Sawyer, for a Emeka Egbuka, who's put everything in this, in an hour going to leave with this enormous hole on their resume with no gold pants and no Big Ten championship when they set this out as all 3 of those goals. And Michigan stood in the way of the top 2 every single time. I have, I don't know, genuine curiosity and maybe not doubt, but some level of doubt about how they're able to do that because they wouldn't play in Michigan in the playoffs, so maybe that clears the deck for them. But getting over that hurt, I'm wondering how that happens.
I don't think there's a correct answer for it, right? I think from a legacy standpoint, there is one thing that trumps what you just talked about, not beating Michigan, not winning the Big Ten championship, and that's winning the national championship. That's the only thing that trumps anything that you just talked about and helps build a legacy around this football team. And especially you talk about those guys, like their tenure of being an Ohio State football player. And so I think if you're them, like realizing that one goal is still there and it can salvage so many things, you have to force yourself to start focusing on what's at hand, right? Like you start looking at projections and they're not going to have an easy path. You're going to have to play some big time teams. You're going to have to win some big time games. The great thing is, we all know this team has the talent to do that, right? This team has the talent to win a national championship. It's how do you prepare yourself and mentally force yourself to get over what happened on Saturday and turn the page to what can be, right? And I guarantee you if it's, January 20th or whatever the game is, and you're playing for a national championship and you win, everyone's going to forget about this past Saturday. Everyone's going to forget that this team never, or these group of seniors never beat Michigan, never won a Big Ten championship. Like no one's going to be thinking about that. You just have to force yourself, those guys in this situation, to pull everyone together. This is when you close the ranks. It's kind of the same conversations we had after the Oregon game, right? Like great teams find a way to come together and freaking start fighting when your back's against the wall. And right now, I mean, they're laying on the boxing ring, and the ref is at an 8 or 9 count right now, right? And they got to force themselves to stand up and be able to find a way to come back punching. And so we'll see what kind of fight this team has. We'll see what kind of fight this program has based off of how they handle things moving forward.
Yep. So they've got to wait now until Selection Sunday to figure out what that path looks like. We'll have plenty of time to break that down. When you look back at Saturday, though, Zach, in what happened, and you try and wrap your mind around it, what part is the most confounding for you?
Oh man, that's a hard question because there's so many. I think you obviously have to go to the offense side of the football and how you only score 10 points against a Michigan defense that I would say is not one of the strongest in the country, especially that secondary. When you have those weapons at wide receiver, and you are not threatening those DBs probably as much as we should have, that's where I have the most questions. I could have told you, everyone could have told you, and we talked about it on the show last week, and why I was confident, but at the same time, like, worried about this game, because that defensive front of Michigan's is very good. And we knew that was probably the one strength on their entire team that they had. And so when you start kind of getting in this cycle of doing the same thing over and over again, of running the football and trying to especially run it inside, and you're not getting any success, like, you have to be able to pivot off of that, right? And you saw going before halftime where we ran tempo and started spreading them out, and Will Howard was throwing the football around, and we were threatening, the Michigan secondary. It's like you saw a lot of success, and that led to the only touchdown Ohio State had all game. So you start looking back, and it's like, where was that in the second half? Why weren't we spreading them out, going up tempo, trying to threaten the Michigan secondary more, throwing the ball down the field more? Like, in my opinion, you've got very possibly some of the 3 best receivers in all of college football, right? And you have to use that to your advantage, especially in these big games. And I know so much of the attention goes to the rushing battle. And like, there's a crazy stat of however many past games, like the winner of the rushing battle wins the game. You also have to realize, like, hey, listen, I'm playing with a altered interior offensive line, actually an altered completely offensive line, right? Who their strength is probably pass blocking over run blocking. It's like, who are we, right? Like, we know, let's spread them out and let's throw the football against a wounded Michigan secondary. And that's, I think, where the biggest questions come up. That's where I think the frustration comes up. And hopefully those guys learn their lesson, right? Hopefully the coaching staff is thinking about this. Like, we can't be this team that we think we want to be. We need to change things up. We need to start spreading things out more, maybe go into more 4 wide receiver sets, right? I don't know, Austin. What do you like? What questions questions do you have from this?
I started on Saturday in that post-game press conference, which was one of the stranger ones that I've been around covering Ohio State for 14 years now. My question was about the tempo and not taking the deep shots, and maybe if Josh Simmons and Seth McLaughlin were still on this team, Ohio State could have ran the football at Michigan, and they could have been a smash mouth, tougher team in this game. But that wasn't the hand that they were dealt. And you still had more than enough personnel elsewhere to put real strain on Michigan's secondary. And I think, Carson Hinsman, which he didn't play perfect, obviously. Austin Sarabeld, he didn't play perfectly. But they did enough and largely had shown that they could give time to Will Howard and those receivers to beat Michigan. So to me, it started with the game plan. And I felt this way on Saturday, and I still feel this way now. You mentioned maybe the coaches learned something. I thought Ohio State was playing with energy, playing with passion, playing hard. The players on the field. I saw that in pregame. But if you compared the 2 teams, which I did in real time, there was no comparison which one wanted to be there and which one wanted to prove a point, which one wanted to fight, which one was itching to go win the game. It was Ohio State. I think there have been times that you've watched the Buckeyes in this game in recent years, and they've looked flat. There had been some complacency around 2021 where they just thought they were going to go out there and roll the silver bullet helmet out there and win the game. I did not feel that way on Saturday, and even during the game, I didn't feel that way. Will Howard was doing everything he possibly could to get back on the field and get his helmet after a possible concussion, when we can have different conversations about whether that was a good or smart thing or whatever. But he wanted to do anything to play. The guys that were on defense, yes, they missed a tackle on the last drive of the game. They gave up 2 scoring drives in the first half of 6 yards. They were doing everything they possibly could. Jack Sawyer and Caleb Downs made 2 of the best interceptions you're ever going to see. There are individual moments of brilliance for those guys. I do not question whatsoever the effort from the guys on the field. So what does that mean for me? What is my question out of that, Zach? This is a coaching staff loss. And I know that there's conversation, and I can't really argue against it, that it goes right to the top with Ryan Day now being 1-4 in this game. He ultimately has to shoulder the blame for that, and he knows that. But the offensive game plan, I do not understand from Chip Kelly. I think the defense did what it needed to do. I don't take any exception with giving up 13 points in this game, even with Michigan's deficiencies. They were put in really bad spots in the first half and did what they could to shoulder the load, in my opinion. But then the continued special teams breakdowns with 2 missed field goals, putting Travion Henderson out there when that's been proven pretty consistently to not be an option, and you botch a kickoff to start the third quarter. You also lost a bunch of free yardage even when you had Caleb Downs over there. We've seen this time and time again where they don't field a punt properly. These things are all ultimately on the coaching staff, and I don't blame Travion Henderson for that, and I don't blame Caleb Downs for that. I think that's why there are people that are asking about what the future looks like. But, I'll say it right now before we get to that, because I've said a lot. And this is supposed to be a Boren blitz, not an Austin blitz. But the fact that there's still $37 million on the table for a coach who's got Ohio State in the playoff, and it's 2 days until the early signing period, and Ohio State's got a chance to sign maybe the best class in the country. I do not believe that there is going to be a move made with Ryan Day and a change in the head coach of this program. But you and I have had a number of conversations because other people have questioned him after Michigan losses or after the Oregon loss. If people want him out, fans want him out, they're done, they don't believe. I won't argue against it, because they are the ones that set the standard of beating Michigan, winning the Big Ten, and then a national championship after that. He hasn't done that. So if you're upset and frustrated, I'm not going to try to change your mind on that part. I think just logistically, because of what we said at the start, this team could very well still win 4 games and win a national championship, and the financial ties and the recruiting ties and the roster ties means it's not likely to happen, even though I absolutely understand the peak frustration coming out of Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to, I think, when you lose a game, regardless of what game it is at Ohio State, people are going to be outspoken about their feelings and what they think should happen. When you lose the Michigan game, especially 4 times in a row, it gets amplified, right? But to your point, at the end of the day, there are so many other things at stake here. When you talk about roster retention, you talk about recruiting, you talk about a massive buyout. You also talk about, I know he hasn't won games, but look at his track record with putting an Ohio State football team in the college football playoff, right? You look at that, and this is still a very successful program. I think if you looked around the country and you asked other college fan bases what they think of Ohio State, they'd be like, "Oh my God, they're maybe the best program around," and maybe outside of Georgia that you'd get people to say. And then when people see that you want to fire your coach, all based off of losing to Michigan 4 times in a row, as an Ohio State fan, you get it. But from an outsider's perspective, they think you're freaking crazy, right? Because they're like, this is still such a strong Ohio State football team. I know even the national media people are talking about how talented this Ohio State football is and how big of a run they can still make in the college football playoff. And it goes back to what we said of, I understand frustration now. Like you said, if people want to call for Ryan Day's job, I'm not going to sit here and argue against it. That's their opinion. It is what it is. The reality of the fact is there is still very 4 games that very well could be possibly played by this Ohio State football team, and there's still so much more at stake with this season. And I think a lot of those questions and a lot of those opinions need to be put on the back burner until you see how this team performs moving forward. I think that's the biggest question mark. It's how we started off the show. It's kind of how we're wrapping with it is,
Yeah.
how does this team come together and finish the rest of the season? That's the one ththing that can salvage everything. And so if you go out and you host a first round playoff game and you lose, then I think there's even, then those questions are probably very much valid. But if this team goes on a run and even plays for a national championship game or gets into the Final Four and shows like, hey, they got some fight in them, then I think a lot of those opinions need to be put on the back burner again. And there is way too much. There are way too many negatives from positives if you were to fire Ryan Day at this point in time.
Yeah, I think that's right. Because you're trying to put everything in context that, yes, the 3 public facing ultimate goals they're coming short of, but they're also not the only ones that Ryan Day is being evaluated on. So, that's we'll see, because the playoff is ultimately going to decide this for Ohio State. The last couple of years when we've wrapped up the game, Zach, you have talked about the passion, the intensity, the leadership, the motivation. Did you watch Saturday and feel like you saw the same thing that I did from the players?
Yeah, for sure. I think if you look at the last 4 years of games, right? I would say that this year was the most fight and physicality that we've seen from an Ohio State football team. And so I don't think you can question the leadership of the team, the fight of the team, the energy of the team, because I think all of that was there the entire game. You hit the nail on the head already. It comes down to offensive game plan, execution, crucial mistakes, right? Like you talk about turnovers in this game, and the turnovers were crucial, but there are so many things that this Ohio State coaching staff could have done by putting players in different positions during that game, especially on the offense side of the football, that weren't done. The effort thing, we've talked about it earlier in the year. The effort was there. I truly believe that. I think the want was there. Ohio State got into a 4-quarter fight, and they knew it. And I thought they fought the entire time. We're sitting here talking about it, and it's 2 days later, and there's still so many questions about this game. And sometimes it's hard to put into words because there are so many feelings and emotions and thoughts that are running through your head at this time. Yeah, man, this is one of those games that you could step back, and especially as a player, as a coach, you can watch it. You can watch that game, that film 25 times, and you're probably going to have different questions after every time you watch it, right?
Right.
Not getting points after the Caleb Downs interception, right? Mind blowing how that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You brought up, you give up 2 scoring drives in Michigan, and the total drives on those drives were 6 yards. I think going into the fourth quarter, I saw this. I think going into the fourth quarter, the start of the fourth quarter, the Michigan offense had 5 first downs, and the 2 scoring drives were 6 yards. If you were to tell me that going into the game, I would tell you, oh my God, Ohio State's just absolutely dominating the game, right?
Well, they were. The yardage was 2-1 at that point. Yeah. It was. I did not have any doubt, especially after halftime. After they put together the drive, after they went tempo, after they found Jeremiah Smith, and after, all of that happened, I was like, well, this game is over, because there's no way that Michigan can score. And they didn't. I mean, they got 1 field goal, but even then, so when I put this on the coaching staff and those decisions, and again, that's what they're paid to do, they still had a chance to get off the field. And the coaching staff ran 12 people onto the field and gave Michigan a free first down. So when we're talking about things, it's not even just schematic. It's in-game decisions that actively harmed Ohio State.
I wasn't going to bring that up on the show, right? Because I think that's yeah. You come off a timeout, right? Come off a timeout is what, 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4. I
Yeah,
forget
3rd
what
and
it
3.
was. 3rd and 3, and yeah, you come out of a timeout with 12 men on the field. I don't understand it. I don't get it. Yeah, man, I'm just gonna leave it at that because that's one of those ones that's so frustrating. And I'm sure looking back, it's gonna haunt those coaches for a long time because you get off the field right there, you force Michigan to kick a field goal. Next thing you know, you still have 2 timeouts. I think at that point, I think maybe that was just before the 2-minute warning as well. And now you've got everything in front of you. You can actually put a drive together, do some different things, and hopefully get the ball down the field to get back in the field goal range, tie the game up, or potentially go for a game-winning score.
Yeah, but that did not happen, and there's no changing that. Ohio State is going to have to live with it forever. But as you said, Zach, they will have a chance in 6 days to start getting back out there and making a plan for the college football playoff. That's not absolutely guaranteed. The selection committee can do whatever they want, but Ohio State has put itself in position by beating Penn State and Indiana primarily, going 10-2 to earn a spot, and we'll see what happens from there for one of the most talented teams in the country, but not one that was able to earn a spot in the Big Ten title game after losing for the 4th consecutive year in the game. All right, we got this one out of the way. Maybe there'll be some more optimism in a week's time when we return for the Boren Blitz. We'll see. I appreciate, as always, Zach Boren jumping on with us on the podcast, David, to kick off the week. He is Zach. I am Austin Ward. We'll talk to you later.